Hey everybody, this is Bill. Welcome to the channel. Now here on the channel we talk stocks, we talk real estate, and we also talk college football. And in today's video we're going to go to college football. We're going to give you our final top 25 of the season with the Georgia Bulldogs winning the national championship. So let's take a look at our final top 25. At 25 we have Fresno State. Now, the Bulldogs finished very strong with 9 straight wins, culminating with a dominating victory over a decent Washington State team in the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl. Now, talented quarterback Jake Haener was injured in an early close loss to Oregon State, but his return helped the Bulldogs to their run, which also avenged an earlier loss to Boise State. This was a good football team at season's end and very worthy of their ranking at 25th. At 24 is South Carolina. Now, Beamer ball is in full swing up at USC. On the heels of a bowl victory over North Carolina last year, some had projected the Gamecocks as a trendy pick for 2022. But South Carolina got off to a poor 1-2 start, and that culminated with a blowout loss in Columbia versus Georgia. Now, wins as a dog at Kentucky and at home against Texas A&M sparked hope, but that was derailed by a poor home loss to Missouri. Now, the Gamecocks got absolutely hammered at Florida, but they scored a monumental home upset over 5th-ranked Tennessee before defeating rival Clemson on the road for the first time in many a moon. Now, Notre Dame proved a bit too much for the Gamecocks in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, but the future seems solidly bright for Beamer and South Carolina, who finished 24. UCLA is 23rd. Now, given the Bruins returned a veteran squad with Dorian Thompson-Robinson directing the offense, some saw UCLA making big noise in 2022. Now, a lucky late home win early over South Alabama. Now, they turned out to be pretty decent. This put UCLA 3-0, but it sounded an alarm. But then they got wins over Washington and Utah, which were very impressive, and this pushed the Bruins to 6-0. But UCLA could not take down Oregon, so they fell to 6-1. Now, a very disappointing home loss to Arizona preceded a very strong performance in a loss to USC. Now, UCLA lost late now to Pitt in a close Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, finishing 9-4. But this was a very solid season for UCLA and Coach Chip Kelly. Pitt is in at 22nd. Now, Pittsburgh was the defending ACC champion coming into 2022, but they had significant personnel losses which hampered expectations. They opened 1-1, barely winning the backyard brawl versus West Virginia, and it was good to see that being played, by the way. And then they lost in overtime to Tennessee, who we know turned out to be outstanding. Now, an alarming home loss to Georgia Tech, and then a win against slumping Virginia Tech led to back-to-back losses at Louisville and North Carolina. So Pitt seemed kind of just in a maze there. But they did find themselves, and they won 5 in a row to close. And this included a late win here against UCLA in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. So Pitt finishes 9-4 and ranked 22nd. Troy has jumped in at 21st to close the season. Now, the Trojans were a strong football team in 2022, very worthy of this final ranking in the top 25. An early loss at Ole Miss was certainly expected, but Troy then lost on the road to Appalachian State in a miracle finish, and that put them at 1-2. But they ran off 11 in a row, including their Cure Bowl win over Texas San Antonio. Now, this included some close games, but hey, folks, wins are wins. And wins over respected South Alabama and Coastal Carolina, along with this bowl win versus University of Texas San Antonio and their fine quarterback, these were impressive. So we've got Troy in there at 21st. Congratulations. At 20 is Texas. The Longhorns almost scored a huge upset early when they hosted Alabama, and they may have got it done if quarterback Quinn Ewers was not injured in the mid-portion of this game. Now, the Horns then lost at Texas Tech, and Texas Tech turned out to be a pretty good team. And then they won 3 in a row with an absolute thrashing of Oklahoma in their Red River rivalry. I mean, that was eye-opening. But Texas then lost to Oklahoma State, but they followed that with a win over eventual Big 12 champion K-State. before losing at home to Texas Christian. Now, the Horns played a very strong Washington team in the Alamo Bowl and ended up losing that ball game. But they did finish 9-4, and for those looking for Texas to get back on the national stage, they showed some promise that might happen under Coach Steve Sarkisian. So with Ewers back next year, they look to be a fine football team. So we're going to keep our eye on the Horns. But for 2022, they finish 20th. At 19 comes in Mississippi State. A strong regular season with a win at Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl seemed unimportant after the Bulldog family lost the Pirate, head coach Mike Leach, to a heart attack. Now, Hail State was strong all year, but they had a murderous schedule. Losses came in Week 3 at LSU, and back-to-back in October at Kentucky and Alabama on the road, and at powerful Georgia. So Mississippi State did dump Illinois in the ReliaQuest Bowl in honor of Leach, which was very impressive. Illinois was a good football team. So we'll see where the Bulldogs go from here without Leach, but they did in fact have a very strong season here in 2022, and they finish up at 19. At 18 is Notre Dame. Now Notre Dame played powerful Ohio State in the opener, very close, but then got upset at home by Marshall. Ouch! Now they got a win over Cal and at North Carolina and versus BYU, which gave indication the Irish were settled in. But then came another home loss to an unusually bad Stanford team. So there's concern there in South Bend. But they did get a win over a decent Syracuse team and then proceeded to thump Clemson. I mean, just rip them. So Notre Dame then went on to play USC, but they could not handle the Trojans on the road in Los Angeles. Now the Irish did beat a decent South Carolina team in the Gator Bowl. With Wake Forest transfer Sam Hartman coming in at quarterback next year, hopes are high for the Irish in 2023, so let's keep our eye on them. But kind of a mediocre season for the Irish. And first-year coach Marcus Freeman in 2022, they're finishing up 18th. At 17 is Southern California. Now with Lincoln Riley coming over from Oklahoma and bringing many of his players, and big wins scored in the portal, many thought USC would be very formidable in 2022, particularly on offense. In fact, their quarterback this year, Caleb Williams, who came from Oklahoma, won the Heisman Trophy. Now, the Trojans scored plenty, but although there was some improvement, they were still a bit suspect on the stop side. Now, loss one came on the road with a 2-point conversion at the game's end by Utah. Now, USC then outscored UCLA, but they got handled in the Pac-12 championship game again by Utah. Now, unable to bow up on defense, the Trojans squandered a lead and lost the Cotton Bowl to Tulane, 46-45. Wow, Tulane just ran it all over them. Now, the Trojans are going to be improved, and they will be good in 2023, but again, we're going to need to see the Trojans take it up a notch on defense. This was true when Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma, and it remains true right now. So we'll have to watch it in 2023, but for 2022, Southern Cal, 17th. The Tulane Green Wave are 16th. Coach Willie Fritz and the Green Wave made the most of their historical appearance in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl, upending Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams and the Southern California Trojans in a wild 46-45 win. Now, Tulane finished 12-2. They won 10 of their last 11, including avenging a late loss in the season to UCF. Now, an early road win over Big 12 champ Kansas State was huge for Tulane. Now, Fritz has signed up again to remain with the Green Wave, and I don't expect them to go anywhere. So I look for Tulane to be good again in 2023. This is an outstanding job that Fritz has done, and we should take good notice. They did beat Southern Cal in the Cotton Bowl, so they're 16th. Oregon comes in at 15th after getting demolished in the opener against Georgia and Atlanta. The Ducks responded strongly. They ran to 8-1 before losing at home to a very strong Washington team. Now, Oregon then beat eventual conference champion Utah before losing on the road at cross-state rival Oregon State. So the Ducks had 3 regular season losses to 2 top 10 teams and a really good Oregon State team. So Oregon won a close one against North Carolina in the Holiday Bowl. That was a good game. I watched all of that. Oregon did finish 2-2 closing the season. But it was overall a very strong season, and we had to be impressed with quarterback Bo Nix. He played extremely well this year. And with him returning and a slew of talent on the squad, we're going to keep our eyes on the Ducks in 2023. They look to be a good team. LSU is 14th. Now, LSU had an interesting season, at times looking like a possible championship contender. Now, it started out with a close loss to Florida State in the opener, but then LSU ran to 4-1 before Tennessee brought their high-powered offense to town, and they laid waste to the Tigers in Death Valley. That was eye-opening for sure. But LSU then came back and beat Florida, Ole Miss, and upset Alabama, and were on their way to looking really good, maybe even in the play. And they lost Thanksgiving weekend at Texas A&M, who had a horrific year. So LSU then went to the SEC championship game and got pounded by Georgia. They were not expected to be in it, and they weren't. But then they got a spot in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, and they played an undermanned Purdue team, and they absolutely walloped the Boilermakers. However, please note the Boilermakers lost like the top 6 players didn't play in the game. They weren't going to beat LSU anyway, but they had no chance. So LSU did, however, as we look at 2022, outperform expectations, and they are going to be considered a top 10 outfit heading into 2023. The Tigers are going to be in the thick of it. You watch. Clemson finishes 13th. Now, most analysts had Clemson a borderline playoff team. We did not. But while the Tigers still did not see themselves, they were playing quite well and sitting at 8-0 before the wheels came off at Notre Dame. Now, rebounding wins over Louisville and Miami impressed, but the Tigers then fell at home to cross-state rival South Carolina to sour the year. Now, Clemson did beat North Carolina to win the ACC championship, but they were outclassed in the Orange Bowl against Tennessee. There's work to be done for 2023, so we're going to keep our eyes on Dabo and the Tigers and see what's up, but they don't look like the playoff teams that they used to be. Oregon State is 12th. Now, in our preseason material, we noted Oregon State as a sleeper out in the Pac-12, and the Beavers did not disappoint. After starting 3-0 with wins over Boise State and Fresno State, 2 very decent teams, the Beavers fell in a close defensive game at USC, and they followed that, however, with a decisive loss at Utah. Now, after 3 straight wins, the Beavers had a tight loss at Washington, but they followed that up to cap the season with a home win over Oregon in the Civil War. Oh, that's a big win. Now, Oregon State then went to the bowl game and thumped a depleted Florida team in the Las Vegas Bowl. Now, the Beavers were much better than most think, and they figure to be good again in 2023. But right now, they finished 12th for 2022. A good football team, make no mistake. Florida State finishes 11th. Now, the ascension of Florida State under Mike Norvell arrived a year earlier than expected. Florida State scored a big win to open the season by defeating LSU in New Orleans. Now, after starting 4-0, Florida State then lost 3 in a row to ranked teams, Wake Forest, North Carolina State, and Clemson. However, the Seminoles could have won at least 2 of these contests, and rather than tanking then, the team knew their potential and won 5 in a row to close the season, bombing the Hurricanes on the road and beating rival Florida among those wins. Now, FSU defeated Oklahoma in a close bowl game here in Orlando in the Cheez-It Bowl, but they seem poised to make a big jump, perhaps to the top 5 in 2023. So we got our eye on the Seminoles. 10th is Kansas State. Now, you really have to like what Chris Kleiman's doing up there in Manhattan, Kansas. Now, this year, the Cats avenged an early loss to TCU by winning against TCU in the Big 12 title game, gaining themselves a berth in the Sugar Bowl, where Kansas State was outclassed by Alabama. Now, an early loss to a strong Tulane team looked better and better as the season progressed, and a loss to Texas midseason was nothing to hang your head on. Now, we thought Kansas State would be decent this season, but they exceeded all expectations. In addition, the future seems on a significant upswing for K-State there in the Big 12. Kansas State, the Wildcats, they're 10th. Utah is 9th. Now, we had Utah very high in the preseason, a playoff team, and they were a preseason darling by most. But the Utes stumbled out of the gate, losing right away in the swamp at Florida. Now, Florida, that's a tough place to play, but they should have been more prepared for that game. The Utes then reeled off 4 in a row, before being beat at UCLA. Utah then beat USC in a wild one to begin a win streak of 4 in a row before they fell 20-17 at Oregon. Now, Utah then beat USC handily again in the Pac-12 championship game. Now, Utah was handled by Penn State in the Rose Bowl, disappointingly so, to finish 10-4. But folks, with Utah, Cam Rising is back next year at quarterback. But the past 2 seasons seem to have been a missed opportunity for veteran Utah teams. We'll keep our eye on them as 2023 approaches, with Rising back. Probably be pretty good. The Washington Huskies are 8th. Now, under new coach Kalen DeBoer, the Huskies roared in 2022. They started 4-0, and they served notice with a resounding victory over Michigan State. Now, the Huskies lost at UCLA, and they appeared to lose that game twice because they lost again to Arizona State the following week. But then Washington won 6 in a row before going to the Alamo Bowl and beating a decent Texas team. Now, quarterback Michael Penix, who transferred in from Indiana this season, was sensational. He was among the nation's leaders in statistics from the quarterback position. The Huskies are in good shape heading into 2023 because Penix is back and the team is very strong. So keep your eye on the Huskies. They could be a real team to watch in 2023. Penn State is 7th. The Lions surprised to the upside in 2022, helped by some fantastic play from some freshman recruits. Now, the Lions survived a tough opener on the road at Purdue. It was a fun game, and they scored a decisive win at Auburn, moving to 5-0 before they went to Michigan and got overwhelmed. Now, after thumping a decent Minnesota team, Penn State then fell at home to Ohio State. But the Lions closed out the Big Ten with 5 consecutive wins, and they earned a spot in the Rose Bowl, where they soundly defeated Utah. Now, the Lions seem poised to field a top 10 team in 2023, and it's buoyed by a slew of really good young players. At least 2 of their recruits were fantastic this year, and are going to be better in 2023. So James Franklin and Penn State could be a team to watch out of the Big Ten 2023. Tennessee is 6th. What a stellar season for Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, we expected the Vols to be a top 20 team for sure, but boy, howdy did they impress. It started with brilliant signal caller Hendon Hooker, who's a perfect player for the system of offense that Heupel directs out there at Rocky Top. Now, after surviving an on the road at Pitt in overtime, Tennessee started flexing muscle. They beat Florida, and they thumped LSU in Death Valley before beating Alabama on a late kick in Rocky Top. Wow, that's the first time they beat Alabama in a long, long time. And Florida, too, for that matter. So Tennessee went 8-0, but they could not handle the Georgia Bulldogs on the road in Athens. Now, Tennessee then got inexplicably dominated by South Carolina on the road in a very puzzling performance. Hooker got hurt late in that game, but it was over before he got hurt. Now, Tennessee then went and demolished a pretty decent Vanderbilt team, and then they won decisively against Clemson in the Orange Bowl to finish strong here inside the top 10 at 6th. Michigan is 5th. The Wolverines returned a veteran team in 2022, and we expected them to be a top 5 team, and they are. Michigan opened with some inferior teams out of conference to move to 3-0 before starting Big Ten play. A too close for comfort win over Maryland led to strong wins over Iowa, and weeks later, dominating wins over ranked Penn State and rival Michigan State. Now, Michigan really impressed the nation by decisively beating Ohio State in Columbus, and after winning the Big Ten championship game against Purdue, off to the playoff the Wolverines went. Now, Michigan was blindsided by a freewheeling TCU team led by their Heisman finalist quarterback Max Duggan, but at 12-1, with that Ohio State win in our minds in the forefront, Michigan very worthy of this top 5 finish. TCU is 4th. Now, Texas Christian played for the championship in the title game, but they got walloped by Georgia. They did surprise everyone this year under new coach Sonny Dykes, running the table in the Big 12. However, they were upset in overtime by Kansas State in the Big 12 title game. Even so, TCU made the playoff, and they were led all season long by the stellar play of Heisman candidate Max Duggan at quarterback. Now, TCU went to the playoff, defeated powerful Michigan to advance to the championship game against Georgia. The Horned Frogs were exposed by the Bulldogs, 65-7. But it was a storybook season for Dykes and TCU. We shall see if the Horned Frogs can continue their success into the future. But under Dykes, that future seems pretty bright in our mind. Alabama is third. The Crimson Tide had the ingredients to be a playoff team heading into the season. We had them preseason number 1, but they fell a shade short on performance this year. Alabama escaped at Texas early in the season and early October again at Texas A&M at the goal line. They then fell at Tennessee on a late field goal. And then after an impressive win over Mississippi State, the Tide fell at LSU in overtime. 2 losses by a total of 3 points. And that left Alabama out of the playoff. Now the Crimson Tide took out their frustration. Of course, they beat Auburn, but then they took out their frustration on Kansas State, the Big 12 champion, in the Sugar Bowl, clobbering the Wildcats. We got Alabama third. They're not happy with it, but that's where we got them. We'll see what happens next year. They're looking for a new quarterback and a new stellar defender. Ohio State comes in second. The Buckeyes were an expected playoff team, and although they never seemed to maximize their potential, they did make the playoff. An early, less than dominating win over Notre Dame raised some questions, but such is life at the top. Ohio State then destroyed Iowa, who has an elite defensive unit, 54-10, and followed that with a resounding win at Penn State, showing signs of what the Buckeyes could be. Now, the Buckeyes were exposed, losing at home to arch rival Michigan in a game that really wasn't that close. However, the Buckeyes found themselves in the playoff and finally maximized their potential, taking Georgia to the brink, missing on a last-second makeable field goal at expiration as 2022 came to a close. Well, that was a tough loss to culminate the season, but Ohio State finishes in at number 2. And they're going to be good again next year, even though they're also looking for a new quarterback. And Georgia is number 1, the Georgia Bulldogs, the 2022 national champions. Now, with extensive losses of defensive personnel heading into the 2022 season, few had the Dogs positioned as the team to beat, although most everyone had them in the top 3. Now, Georgia was just fine on the stop side, quite obviously. And they were very strong on offense, with Stetson Bennett back, and Brock Bowers, that wonderful tight end they have. Now, while the Dogs were not high octane every week, they had some tussles with Kent State and on the road at Missouri and Kentucky. Overall, they dominated. Just ask Oregon, who got decimated in the opener by the Dogs. Now, Georgia survived the semifinal with Ohio State, we had just discussed, who missed a makeable field goal at the end of the game. But the Dogs got into the final against Texas Christian, and they thrashed the Horned Frogs 65-7 to win the national championship. It's a back-to-back title for the Bulldogs. So congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs, the 2022 national champions. Okay, folks, before we exit, we want to take a moment to remember head coach Mike Leach of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Coach Leach died of a heart attack after the season prior to the bowl games. Coach Leach was a very innovative coach. He helped install the air raid that you see all over college football. He's got a coaching tree you just can't believe when you look around. It includes Lincoln Riley, many other fantastic coaches. He was a wonderful guy, really neat guy, on and off the field. He's a guy we're really, really going to miss here in college football. I want to send our condolences out to Coach Leach's friends and family and Bulldog Nation, all the former players and everything. Just college football is really going to take a loss not having Coach Leach around. So wanted to remember him as we conclude the 2022 season. Folks, you can follow us over on Facebook at Color and Pageantry. We look forward to seeing you next year. We're going to do it all over again. It's going to be a very exciting year. You guys take care. We'll see you soon.